We're going to make freezer tomato sauce. This is a great recipe you can make in advance and freeze it down in usable portions for your household. One of the ingredients we use most often for a lot of soups and sauces are onions. So let's talk about dicing an onion. You just want to make sure you have a comfortable grip on your knife, holding it more forward on the handle, closer to the blade. You may notice a lot of chefs will actually hold it right by the blade. This is to give you more control with your knife. The other part of knife safety is how you're holding whatever it is you're cutting. This is the hand that gets cut more often. A lot of people will hold on to their vegetables with all their fingertips out, and that's usually where most of the cuts happen. So if you can practice doing the claw, we teach everyone day one, we get taught in cooking school, using the claw. It tucks all your fingertips away, including your thumb, to make sure that you are as safe as possible in the kitchen. It may be something that feels a little bit awkward at first, but the more you practice it, the easier it can become. I'll start by cutting off a little bit from the top here. The end on the core end here, we use a lot in the kitchen to help the onion stay together. So when we're dicing it, our layers don't fall apart. So for this end, I really like to cut off the least amount possible, just kind of those bits that might be getting a little bit messy on your cutting board. The root end here, we're going to cut through our onion. Once it's cut in half, it's a lot easier to peel off any of the excess skin that you may want to get rid of. That's ready to go. Now, our root end is here. Because I'm right-handed, I'm going to keep the root end on the left-hand side. I'm going to cut most of the way through the onion horizontally, but not all the way through that root end that I'm trying to keep intact. I'm going to keep my hand together in the claw, this time holding the onion down so that the onion won't move around on me. We're going to start doing horizontal cuts. I'm doing a bit of a sawing motion with my knife, cutting most of the way through the onion, but not all the way through, keeping that core intact. We'll do one more cut most of the way through. And now we're going to start doing vertical cuts. So again, I don't want to cut through my root end. We're going to cut down through the onion, cutting most of the way through. And there we go. Now that we have it at this point, the onion's still holding together, and we can just start cutting down to get our diced onion. Next up, we're going to dice our carrot. We've got our carrot peeled, ready to go here. A lot of times this can be intimidating for people at home as it is one of the more firm vegetables to cut through. So we'll talk about how we can do that a little bit safer as well. So the first part about that is that I never want to try to cut the whole carrot in one. I always want to cut it into small, more manageable pieces. I'm still going to do the claw and have my good grip on my knife. I'm just going to cut this down into smaller pieces. For a carrot that long, I would usually cut it into 3 pieces. We'll start with our first cut here, where we're going to get started in there. If you're a little bit nervous at this point, you can always take your hand off, move it off to the side, and help press through in a safe manner. Once we have a flat side here, I'm going to use that as kind of an anchor so that my carrot won't move around on me as much anymore. At this point, I can cut it down into strips. Again, when it gets a little bit narrow for the last cut, if you're worried about that, you can always take your hand off. So we can keep these stacked if you feel comfortable that way, or just do them one at a time. I'm going to cut them into long strips, and then we can dice them from there. So once I have them into long strips, we're just going to turn them sideways, try to keep them lined up, and we'll cut down to get even pieces. We'll just finish off our carrot here and keep going. And there we have our diced carrots. In this recipe, we're using Roma tomatoes. We're going to quarter them and seed them before they get roasted in the oven for our recipe. So to do that, we're going to use our washed Roma tomatoes, and we're going to cut just into quarters. Once you get it cut in half, you can put it on its flat side, a little bit easier to cut through, a little bit safer. Now we've got them into our 4 quarters. To remove the seeds, usually we'll just start with our knife, holding it at the end, being very careful, just doing a gentle sawing motion again. Once we kind of get close on this end, usually I'll hold it over here so that I'm sure I'm not going to cut myself. We get most of these seeds out there that add a little bit of bitterness into the sauce, can make it a little bit watery as well. Once you get all your tomatoes quartered, you'll be ready to roast them in the oven. There's our quartered tomatoes. Now that we've prepped the vegetables for our freezer tomato sauce, we're going to talk about roasting our quartered seeded Roma tomatoes. We've got all 4 pounds of them here ready to go, and it's going to be quite simple. We're going to add another layer of flavor by roasting these in the oven. We're going to add some of our smashed garlic into that as well. That's going to give the garlic a lot of flavors. We need half of our olive oil, about 2 tablespoons. We're going to season that with a little bit of salt and pepper. Remember, we can season the sauce again afterwards, but we'll get a good start here by seasoning our tomatoes. We're just going to give this a quick stir. You want to have your oven preheated to 400 degrees Fahrenheit so that you're adding this into a nice hot oven. By roasting it at a high temperature, it's going to get a little bit of brown bits on there and really get another layer of flavor to your final sauce. We'll just dump them out onto our sheet. Just use your spoon to spread them around to get as even of a layer as possible. We're going to pop them into the oven on the middle rack, where they're going to roast for about 45 to 50 minutes. You can give them a stir halfway through the cooking time just to ensure that they roast evenly. You want it to get some nice brown bits in there. That's really going to add another layer of flavor when you go to finish the sauce off afterwards. A lot of people think that you need to get your tomato sauce out of a can at the store. Not true. Simple to make at home, and we can make it right here in front of you. Now that we've got our roasted tomatoes in the oven, cooking away, getting some nice flavor on them, we can continue by sauteing some of our vegetables that we've diced up. We've got our diced onion, carrots, and celery. We've got some water to carry the sauce, stretch it out a little bit. We've got some canned crushed tomatoes here and our remaining olive oil to saute our vegetables. We've got our pot preheated to medium heat. We've added our olive oil. Now we're going to start to saute our vegetables. We're going to add our onions, our carrots, and our celery. All right, now that we've got all our vegetables in here, we're just going to brown them off slightly. Take about 20 minutes or so. You don't have to try and rush through this stage. We're just going to soften up those vegetables and start adding a layer of flavor. All right, now that we've sauteed our vegetables for about 15 or 20 minutes here, the onions have started to get a little bit translucent, and we're just getting a little bit of color on some of the vegetables, but not too much. That's exactly what we want. Keep the heat about medium right now, and we're going to start adding our other ingredients. We can start with our roasted Roma tomatoes, which we've got here. You can see on there we've got a little bit of color on the tomatoes. That's all flavor. That's exactly what we're looking for on the garlic cloves as well. I'm just going to carefully place all of our tomatoes into the pot. Make sure any little bits of accumulated tomato juice on the bottom of the pan you put into the pot as well. There we go. Our remaining ingredients now are a can of crushed tomatoes. And we've got 2 cups of water here. All right, so we're just going to stir all this together. You can add a little pinch of salt in there now. Remember, we can always check seasoning at the end once we've pureed everything. We've brought our sauce up to a boil. Now we've reduced the heat to medium-low, and we're going to simmer our sauce for about 45 minutes to 1 hour. We can tell we've achieved the simmer when we have just a few bubbles on the surface of the sauce. We've simmered our sauce for 45 minutes. Now it's ready to puree. We can blend this in our blender, and then we'll be ready to serve. If you have any more questions, give us a call or visit the website.